So the concluding factors, yeah, pretty ugly, do looks matter. So the thing is, I have an older sister and she's light skinned. She's fairer skinned than me. And it's inevitable that when you have siblings, even when people say, oh, don't compare yourself, you know, or oh, you shouldn't compare yourself to others, people inevitably do anyway, you know. You do get compared with your siblings. And two instances of this, I'll give an example. So I used to have a friend, someone I considered my good friend, and who took a liking to me. And there was occasion, like, he got to know like some of my family members, and there was an occasion when I met up with him and my sister was with me, and he just jokingly in passing was like, oh, you know, he said something along the lines of like, oh, your sister's more like the smoother one and you're more like rough around the edges, something. You're the one who's like more rough around the edges, aren't you? You know. And another occasion, I was living somewhere, I was in temporary accommodation, and there was this Jamaican black lady, and she was about 10 years older than me at the time, and she was just very sort of like, you know, like fun loving. I remember on occasion she came to me, she was like, oh, I've just been with some Asian taxi driver in the car, and she was like, oh, he just gave me a bit of money, you know, for sucking him toes, like this, she says to me. She was very pretty, she was a very beautiful lady. She wasn't like, she was good looking, like, you know, she was a nice lady. But yeah, she was always like, oh, you know, you're nice, you know, you're pretty and all of this. And then one time my sister, she came to visit me at that place. I was in the lounge area, and then that Jamaican lady, she came in and she saw my sister, and she was looking at me and she was going, oh, you are nice, yeah, but oh yeah, your sister, she's too nice. She's like, oh yes, she's more nice, you know. And she just was really exaggeratingly like emphasizing this, you know. So I do get compared, obviously. Like I said, it's an inevitable thing, you know, if you have a sibling who's like close to your age, a bit older than yourself, a bit younger than yourself, people do compare. So, and I think growing up, you know, I've just gone into that role within my family of like, my sister's like the pretty one, you know, and I'm like the intellectual one or whatever. And, you know, as you're getting older and you're coming more into yourself, you know, it's almost like you're having to break away from these stereotypes or these sort of these what would you call them, these personas that have been placed on you by your family, just in order to regain your own self-identity, you know, and your own concept of yourself, like your own self-concept. And you know, it can be really denting to your ego, you know, and how you feel about yourself when you're just you know, and people like keep doing these comparisons, you know. No matter how much of a thick skin you grow for yourself, you know, sometimes people's comments are hurtful. And I think sometimes people, they play on your insecurities, and you know, they make these comments, you know, they do these behaviors, you know, on purpose, just to, you know, if they think that you're insecure, or if they feel that, you know, you have an insecurity, or that, you know, you're being compared to sibling, or like there's a bit of sibling rivalry going on in your family, and if other people become aware of that, they just play on it, you know. And people are people, this is what they do. They like to tease, they like to bully, they like to push your buttons, and that's what happens. In the comment section, let me know, do you experience anything like this with any of your siblings? You know, do you have an older sister or older brother or younger sister who looks wise you've always like being compared to, you know, and how does that make you feel about yourself, you know? And do you think that people are mindful of their actions, and do you think that do you think that people know what they're doing, you know, when they're kind of doing these like underhanded comments and these type of behaviors? Do you think that they know what they're doing it deliberately on purpose to make you feel a certain way? Or do you think that it's just all innocent jokes and playfulness? Yeah, let me know in the comment section if you experience anything like this. But talking about that, I would say, yeah, my sister, she's very beautiful, and you know, she's very pretty, and I think it's more to do with her colour. I do notice that both my brother and my sister, I do notice that for example, like with customer service, they do get treated different. I've mentioned it to them, but they're in denial. They say, no, Marcia, it's not true, because we get racism just the same way that you get racism. But I have a different view. I do actually, and I have noticed how, for example, in customer service, you know, if it's my sister, my brother as well, because like I said, they're both lighter skinned than myself, they're more fair skinned, so they could pass for mixed race, like half white. And I do notice they do get different treatment and different perceptions. For example, like I'm saying, in customer, if they go into a shop and the person behind the till will be really like, oh, hi, how you doing, how can I help, you know, like this. And I'll be in the same store, you know, and the person behind the till will just either they'll ignore me, or they'll just, you know, like be like kind of like dismissive like this. I do notice the difference myself, so I'm aware that there is a thing called pretty privilege. But similarly, likewise, I think pretty privilege, I think there's like a double-edged sword to pretty privilege, because the thing is, people think that if you're classed in terms of society's beauty standards, if you're classed as like more beautiful, more higher on the social beauty standards, yeah, people think that you get treated better by people and in society, because that's what they call it, pretty privilege, that you get more privileges, people treat you better. And personally, I think that's true to an extent, but I think there's also another side to having looks in your favour that don't actually go in your favour. For example, I'm going to be a bit contradictory here, but for example, you know, people who are better looking on the good looking spectrum, both men and women, it doesn't always necessarily mean that your life is gonna turn out, is gonna be better just because you may be more better looking than other people. And I think that's just a general perception that people have, but I don't think it's always true in every instance, in every case, because the other flip side of being a better looking species of the human species, it can come with a lot of jealousy, and you can get sort of like jealousy from friends, you know, even if it actually, people think it makes it easier to find a partner, but actually I would say it doesn't always necessarily make it easier, because if you're a better looking person, you're more susceptible to getting jealousy from your partner as well, you know, and not just jealousy, but just people's behaviours in general. You know, they can, for example, people will judge you and look at you more based solely on your externals, you know. And for example, if you're quite intellectual, if you've got a good head, if you're someone who's quite career oriented, a lot of times people can be dismissive of other aspects of your personality because they're just so focused on your externals. So pretty privilege, it's a thing that it can go in somebody's favour, but personally I think there are downsides to being a better looking specimen that not everybody is very fully aware of. People don't grasp that. People just think, oh, you know, you're good looking, so your life should be more easier and it should be more sorted. But that's not always necessarily the case. It doesn't just necessarily mean things are going to be easier for you in the relationships department, and in the friends department, and in the careers department. And it doesn't mean life's just going to go like plain sailing for you just because you have pretty privilege, or just because, you know, you're classed as like a better looking specimen than the rest of other people on the planet. And for example, I'll give another example. I've noticed that, you know, men, they'll probably date women because they're looking at, and that's another thing, if someone's good looking, if a woman, yeah, if she's just very externally has a lot of beauty, a lot of the times, if she wants to settle down, if she wants to get married, many times that woman will just be looked at purely for the physical. And I don't know why, for some reason, men just have this perception that if a woman's very beautiful, then she must be very highly sexed, and that's all she wants. They're just after that woman and her goods, you know, like her crown jewels. They're not seeing the woman, you know, as a full, whole-rounded human being, you know, who maybe wants marriage, wants settled life, you know, maybe wants children. They're just looking at the physical. For some reason, I think men have it in their head that when a woman's very beautiful, very attractive, that's all she's about, you know. So it can actually not go in her favour, you know, if she's actually wanting to settle down, you know, want the whole marriage and shebang thing. So I have to go back and see what I've just been, yeah.